What are some important things that an online curriculum designer needs to keep in mind to lower barriers encountered by potential users?
Terrific. That's a great question. Thank you, Janet. Where we ended the last session was really referencing some of the UDL guidelines and the 9 checkpoints under each of the 3 categories of representation, action, expression, and engagement. I'm going to shift gears for just a moment here and go to another set of guidelines that I think are particularly useful because they get increasingly concrete and specific. And I think that's where we need to go in this particular session.
I wanted to say too that if you're a teacher in the classroom, that much of what we're going to be talking about in this section may be technologically mind-boggling. I, coming from the position of teacher in the classroom, will tell you that a lot of it is. It doesn't mean that this is not something you might not want to listen to, but really you might want to refer to part 1 for the particular issues that you want to think about in using these curricula.
And I'll try and make it not too technologically mind-boggling. One of the things that's happened in the last few years is the federal government has promoted some regulations associated with what's known as Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. And the Rehabilitation Act, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, is really targeted towards making sure that individuals with disabilities have equitable access. And in this circumstance, we're looking at equitable access to learning opportunity. So it's not really talking about success or failure within learning opportunity, but just equitable access to that learning opportunity. And the Section 508 guidelines arose out of the need for some guidance related to digital content and everything from hardware and software to web pages and what things should be present to assure that individuals with diverse needs and potentials could have access to the same content, although in different, using different strategies and different means. So what I'm going to be referring to is known in the Section 508 parlance as a VPAT, V-P-A-T, and it stands for Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. Voluntary because Section 508 guidelines are precisely that. They're voluntary. However, the volunteerism kind of ends if you're contracting with the government, because if you have a product you want to sell to them, they're going to ask you for a VPAT because they want to know how you've detailed or how you've met the accessibility requirements in a very detailed way. So I'm not...
Which would be a good thing for a school system to ask for too, yes?
Absolutely, and as you'll begin to see as we go through this, that this is one of the ways we're recommending that you assess products that are being presented to you as being useful and appropriate for use with students in the classroom, is you probably want to ask for a voluntary product accessibility template, particularly if the content is digital. So I'm not going to go through every aspect of the VPAT, but I am going to go through a number of them so you get to tie it together to what we talked about earlier, and also then give you a sense of why it's important. Just a couple of things with relation to operating systems. The VPAT is really broken into a number of categories. First one being software applications and operating systems, and that's where I'm going to focus just most of my comments and impressions. So here's a statement. These are known as criteria. And it says, when software is designed to run on a system that has a keyboard, product functions shall be executable from a keyboard where the function itself or the result of performing the function can be discerned textually. In other words, that you be able to actually see something on a text basis, but it also relates back to what I mentioned earlier, that whole tab enter function, that there's keyboard mapping that allows you to do some navigation. We also mentioned the fact, and I think Joy mentioned about assistive technologies looking for hooks that are embedded in the operating system to be able to magnify text or speak it aloud or highlight words on an individual basis. And one of the criteria in the VPAT is that applications shouldn't disrupt features that already exist in the operating system or use them in some way that is unpredictable. So each one of these, as you'll see, really targets a particular function that's within the software. So let me just, I'm kind of randomly jumping around and looking at content, but they all have to do with operating systems and software. Sufficient information about a user interface element including the identity, operation, and state of the element, shall be available to assistive technology.
There you go. That's what
Okay,
it
so
is.
this goes directly back to Joy's comment of, if there's a button on the screen and the button is essential to send a student response to the system in order to store it in a database, however that button operates needs to be available to an assistive technology, because you may have a student accessing that information who's using a sip and puff switch, and they're going to be activating that button by a puff.
And along with this, it would be really important for it to be consistent, that the same one,
Yes.
the same action happens when you do this, because from the user perspective, if a button does one thing one time and the same action does something else another time, that can be very,
Did
very
you read this
distinct.
next
Did
one?
I read that next? Yeah, I read it on your shoulder.
It says when images are used to identify controls, status indicators, and other programmatic elements, the meaning assigned to those images shall be consistent throughout the application's
Ta-da.
performance.
There you go.
And that's exactly right. That the right arrow should always take you to the next page. It shouldn't bring up, a singing giraffe. Right?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Good, you got that question right.
Yes. Application should not override user-selected contrast and color. Okay, so that you don't want to have the application force you to use, Calibri 12 blue font on a green background.
Right.
So here's another one that's interesting. When animation is displayed, and keep in mind that a lot of commercial products are using Flash. Flash can be a significant challenge for accessibility, because oftentimes the text within a Flash animation is inaccessible to screen readers. So that's just something to pay attention to. This criteria says when animation is displayed, the information shall be displayable in at least one non-animated presentation mode at the option of the user. So what that essentially says is it's fine to have a Flash animation with embedded text in there, but you also better have some other way in a non-animated of getting that same information
Let
to
me
the
give
student.
you a couple of examples of
Yeah.
that. That if you may have to have a text alternative, which would be like an image that has a text that goes along with it, so that with the animation or the image that says this is what's happening in this image. You can have a short description that just briefly describes the image, or if the image is rich in meaning and has a great deal to do with the content being displayed, then you may need a longer description so that people understand what exactly was intended to be communicated. Another thing is if a person cannot read the text or see the image, they may need to hear a description of what's happening. We see a lot of this happening now with, we're all pretty familiar with captions at this point, which we say, oh yeah, that provides accessibility. Well, yes, but not if you're blind. If you're blind, you have to have your image described for you. So there are multiple ways that one would go about doing that, but it's just really important that it's done.
Right. So here's another one. When electronic forms are used, the form shall allow people using assistive technology to access the information, field elements, and functionality required for completion and submission of the form, including all directions and cues. So it sounds, you hear it and you kind of go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But oftentimes you find that form elements in digital materials are not designed to be accessed by assistive technology. It requires a mouse click in the field in order to start entering text, which is fine if you can move a mouse. Alternatively, one way to check that is if there's a page that has a number of forms on it, use the tab key. If the tab key allows you to jump from form element to form element, chances are that assistive technology is going to be able to access those same things.
And if it can't, then you want to think about the hardware, the delivery system part of it, the assistive technology part of it, is then look for an alternative mouse that can be manipulated by a person who cannot use their hands to manipulate a mouse.
Great.
And there are good many pretty slick options out there right now in assistive tech. So hopefully your content is designed in this way, but in the instance where you need to retrofit, you always look for exactly what you want that retrofitted technology to do for you, which is very important.
Absolutely.